welcome to a special grooving session of Behavioral Grooves where Tim and I are going to groove on some of the groove questions that we've posted to our Facebook group and the responses that we've gotten from those.
I love these episodes since we get to focus on insights from groovers who are out there. Like the Behavioral Grooves community page is where groovers get to share their insights about what they're thinking about. And that is just very cool.
It is. And remember, you too can join our Behavioral Grooves Groove community on Facebook. This is where we pose introspective groove questions a few times a week. We have some conversations out there on very interesting topics and share a little bit about some of the episodes that we're actually doing on Behavioral Grooves. But it's a great community.
It's a fun group. Look, lots of insights, lots of banter and exchange, and well beyond what you and I bring to the table.
That's so true. That is so true.
Well, the collective can often be smarter than just one individual, or in our case, two. So, okay. All right. Let's first look back at the groove questions that we asked about change. Which is scarier? This is the question that we're considering. Which is scarier, changing too fast or never changing at all?
Oh, that is a good question. I like that one. That was fun.
Okay, yeah. Well, we heard from a couple people, several people actually responded, Michael and Shell, and your wife, Erin, jumped right in on it. And both of them thought that the scariest thing was never changing.
Right, which I agree with. I still agree with. I didn't just agree then. I still agree now that never changing is the scarier of those. But you, Tim, Mr. Houlihan, you had a slightly different take, one that focused in on scale. And I thought this was really interesting. So I'm going to quote what you wrote in the groove community here. All right. Here it is.
Okay.
Quote, the harder part is generally the fast change because we anticipate the unknowable. How will I be after the change? The worst experience in our life is not changing, but of course, we are making micro changes pretty regularly and unconsciously. So it sort of depends on scale. So do you want to elaborate on that, Mr. Houlihan? What do you mean by scale? Why is it scarier there?
Yeah. So I have to justify or explain. I hate this.
It's an important thing. We need to show how we can, bring our thought process to this.
Okay. All right. Well, so let's start with, and I wasn't trying to be sarcastic here. As really being serious, that we are literally always changing. Biologically, we are aging every day in very, very small amounts. Cognitively, we are encountering new information every day. And certainly some of that is going to change us, right?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so that was my first thought, that I think the idea of not changing, I so agree with Michael and Erin, because that would be terrible if we weren't changing. But I don't think we can stop believing that we are not changing. Like we are changing.
But you think, but there's a part here, right? You're saying that it is almost impossible for us not to change. That just by the nature of being human, we are constantly changing biologically, cognitively. The memories that we have are added to every single moment, and so we are changing. And so the scarier part, at least from our perspective, is this, like, when change happens really quickly or largely. Is that where you're going with this?
Right.
Yeah.
So if these micro changes are happening all the time, we get kind of used to them. It's like the Earth isn't standing still. Earth is spinning at like 10,000 miles an hour, hurtling through space. But we don't think about that because it's just the norm. It's the big changes, I think, that are more challenging. And so I do think that when we think about changing, we tend to want to think that we mostly stay the same. Yeah, even though there's lots of great evidence, Dan Gilbert's famous study about, can you anticipate the kind of changes that you're going to go through in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Right. He did this with 20 somethings. He started with 20-year-olds and then said, what would it be like to be when you're 29? And they could fill in the blanks on big issues. They were pretty good about naming, I'm going to graduate from college. Maybe I might have a partner. I could find a job. Big things, they could nail it. But when they get to the 29-year-olds and they ask them, well, what has changed between 20 and 29? Massive list. There are lots and lots of things that we couldn't encounter. And the beauty of this study is that he repeated the same questions to 60-year-olds and 69-year-olds.
Yeah.
Same
Where
gap.
you go, oh, I'm pretty set in my ways by the time I am 60, that
I
I have
got this.
grown, I'm at the peak of who I will be.
No more big
And what
changes
did he
for me.
find?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to find any more big changes in my life because I'm 60. But the 69-year-old said massive changes. Didn't sure, maybe retire, change jobs, quit jobs, invest in more free time, whatever. Massive changes in their lives. So we just can't easily anticipate it. And so I think the big change problem on a scale is that it's unknown. It's like I can't easily anticipate what is going to change.
I think it's really interesting you bring up that change and the amount of change that we go through that is incremental, but over time makes a huge difference. It is those small everyday changes that are happening that compound and that over time make change us from who we are to who we will be. And it's those things that we don't understand. And I think this is where the question is really interesting, because to your point, I don't think we think about change in that way. When we think about change, we think about, oh, I'm going to do a big, drastic, quick change about who I am. Maybe not quick, but you're going to continually to grow and to do different things. And if you don't do that, that's very scary. And I think the part that's hard is that we don't notice. We are not aware of all of those changes that are taking place.
Yeah. Okay. So, Kurt, a question back to you is what about beliefs and values? Not just behaviors, but what about sort
Mm,
of things that we might consider more core? Because I bristle when people say, oh, I'm exactly the same person as I was when fill in the blank. I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I first got married, when I was in
yeah.
high school. I'm the same person. That just it's not tacitly accurate.
Yeah.
But how do you think about beliefs or values, not just behaviors?
Yeah. I think what you just mentioned is that those are changing as well. And that's harder for us to put our hands around and grasp because I think, and again, I'm not going to be able to point necessarily to good research around this, but I believe the research backs this up, is that those values that we hold, we would like to say, oh, they're the same values that I had when I was, so I'm 58, the same values I had when I was 48, which are very similar to the values I had when I was 38, which are similar to what I had when I was 28. And I can maybe see that those values have changed over the course of my lifetime, but even the values between 58 and 48, they've changed.
How could they not?
The
Yeah.
environment that we live in is changing. The social contracts that we have are changing. The information that we have about who we are, about the world in general, about everything has to impact our beliefs, has to impact our values. And I think that is underrated by most people.
Uh, agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, enough.
All right.
Enough on that.
Okay, let's
We
move
agree.
on. Let's
Okay.
move on to another question. How about that? Shall
Okay.
we go on to, because we could go on forever on these questions, and we
Oh,
sometimes, that's the
sometimes we do.
wonderful part of this community is we can build that. All right. So here is another question, and this one was actually inspired by a response by one of our groovers, Cindy Bodden, who responded to an earlier question about which is riskier, which they thought was riskier, setting goals too high or setting goals too low, where in her comment on the response that she responded to that question, she referenced the Pygmalion effect of how that was more influential. And for those of you who don't know, the Pygmalion effect is a psychological phenomena where higher expectations from others, not from yourself, but from others, leads to improved performance in individuals. Yeah.
Can I just say that if you want to get a great movie on psychology, watch My Fair Lady, which is a movie based on the Pygmalion effect.
I did not know that.
It's
Okay.
absolutely it's an old film, but it's
Yeah.
just fantastic. Okay, so Where this comes from is that back in the 1960s, researchers Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson ran a famous study in elementary classrooms. So they took the teachers basically randomly chose students that were considered intellectual bloomers. Basically,
The researchers said, "Hey, teachers, these students randomly selected are intellectual bloomers."
Yeah.
Keep going
So
on. Yeah.
whether, in fact, they even did IQ tests at the beginning, and basically they just chose randomly who was going to be considered an intellectual bloomer in these elementary classrooms. Um, Over the course of the year, those kids actually did perform better, the ones who were considered intellectual bloomers, but not because of hidden talent, but because of the expectations the teachers had that they were intellectually blooming. So the beliefs that others people have quite literally lifted the aspirations and achievements of the students that were in that condition, and the other kids, they just fared normally, basically.
Yeah, which is it's amazing when you think about that. The expectations of others actually made
Yeah.
those kids smarter. So at the end of the year, when they actually did the IQ tests compared to the IQ tests at the beginning of the year, those students had increased more so than the control group, which is
Yeah.
fascinating, right?
Expectations matter so much. I mean, we've talked about the expectation effect uh, in studies done about milkshakes. A huge thing. And my first manager in after I graduated from college, she said, "If you think you're going to succeed, or if you think you're going to fail, you're probably right."
Yeah, isn't that always like Henry Ford or something? They supposedly said that. I don't know,
Yeah.
somebody. They keep like who actually said that first was there. So anyway, getting back to the question. So the question that Cindy inspired with her Pygmalion Effect response was this, and we wrote this: Who influences your aspirations most? You or the people around you? And we got some really good conversations around this, some really good insights. So yeah.
We did. One of those responses was from Anita Bernardo. And she said, I think this is so beautiful. "I do have internal goals, but I listen to others that see me bigger than I see myself. It expands what I think is possible. There are so many stories of people who do things they didn't consider possible because of feedback from a trusted person, parent, teacher, mentor, etc." I just think that's a beautiful reflection.
It is. And I found it to be such a great response, which goes again to highlight this fact that the people that you surround yourself with are super important and that you need to surround yourself with positive people who believe in you and can see in the potential that you have. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think we're done. I think that I need to find a more positive group of people to hang around with.
Are you saying that I'm a negative influence on you? Man, I thought I was
Not
good. Oh, well,
not every
no.
day.
That's true. That is true. There you go. So,
No, but
no, go ahead.
there's great research on this, right? To show that who you hang around with influences you deeply. And of course, we've got more recent research that indicates not just behaviors, but it also gets into your values. We've had guests on recently that are doing research on your values, and what you believe in is actually influenced by the people around you.
Yeah.
So it matters.
And so, one of the key things here is to think about who it is that you hang out with. And
Yeah.
again, as much as I hate the name of this book, the 5 people that you surround yourself with, or that meme, but there's truth in it, and that is really important. And I think there is a real choice that we have to make, which isn't always easy because sometimes we just need to remove or lessen the negative people in our lives. Sometimes you can't remove them, their family, various different things, but you don't always have to respond to them. You don't always have to do things with them, particularly if you know they're bringing you down, when in fact you should be surrounding yourself with people who are going to, create a Pygmalion effect for you because they go, you are awesome. You have an amazing ability to do things and maybe even believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And just that fact of believing in you can help you achieve those things that you didn't even think possible.
Yeah. So speaking as somebody who has lived in three major cities in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
and the moving around a lot, I've lived in 5 homes in the last 3 years. Finding like a place to fit in is difficult, but I also see that you get to choose. Like, just follow your bliss.
Yeah.
If you love to read books, go to a library and hang out. You will find other people who are doing the same thing. If you love sports, go to sports bars,
Yeah.
go to sporting events, hang out with people who also love the same team. Like, you'll find somebody who has, all you have to do is just in large part, pay attention to what it is that you love and make time for that, and go out and be social. You can create the networks that will provide you with the positive feedback that you need.
Yeah.
That's my message.
And and as some of our guests in the past have talked about, go out and talk to those strangers because though it may feel very awkward and hard and difficult to begin with, you will have a much better response from that. And to your point, you may find those people who you jive with, who you groove with, who bring out the best in you. And I want to just say this: the Pygmalion effect is really interesting because it was done on students and they did it on elementary kids. And then I think they replicated it in other situations and different things. But it is expanded beyond just the classroom, right? This happens in work, as you talked about, your boss and the boss's expectation of you. It happens with our friends and family. What do those people think of us? And so make sure you're in situations where you can capitalize on that.
Yeah, if I could, I just want to call attention to, we talked about expectations in a way that just reminds me of our conversation about Aaliyah Crumb's fantastic research, and that was the mind over milkshakes episode,
Yeah.
which it just explains that really, really well. Okay,
Okay.
that's
All right. So let's explore one more question and the responses that we got from
only
this. And
one more.
well, okay,
Oh,
maybe I don't know.
all
All
right,
right,
okay,
we'll play it by ear. But here we go.
okay.
Okay. There was a whole week, maybe even more, if I actually went and looked at it, where we were asking questions based on a bit of research that I was doing on Kurt Lewin, the famous psychologist from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, who went to or was taught at my alma mater, University of Iowa, for a few years at least.
And he's like your spirit animal, basically, isn't he?
Oh my gosh. A brilliant man. B had so many insights and it just into human nature that have kind of didn't necessarily take off when he brought them up, but then like have been reborn, have kind of like it's like, oh wow, this
Yeah.
really fits back into what Lewin was saying back in the 40s, back in the 50s. And he tragically he died very young. I think he died at my age, which is 58. I'm not sure, but
Ooh,
somewhere he died relatively young.
yeah.
And it would have been just amazing if he could have lived longer just to see where that research would have gone, because I think he was just at the cusp of really getting into deep into some of these other areas. Anyway,
And
our love fest with Lewin, we could go on and on
well,
and on.
he had a good name too.
Oh yeah, Kurt with the K,
Yeah.
the right way to spell it. There you go. So I was doing some research on him because I think it's, I'd like to at some point do a deep dive into Lewin that we would actually do a couple episodes on. Hopefully that'll happen. But I came across this work that I hadn't found with him before, which was about levels of aspiration. And levels of aspiration was some work that he did with Tamara Dembo in the 1930s, where they studied how people set goals. So again, this is right up our alley, Tim. This
Absolutely.
is what we talk about all the time in work and various different things in our consulting world. And I didn't even know that Lewin had been doing this work. And they did experiments on people's levels of aspiration in which they found that we tend to recalibrate our goals either after a success or failure, kind of recalibrate based upon, oh, I set this goal, I achieved this goal. So great. Next time I can actually recalibrate a little bit higher, or I set this goal, I didn't achieve it. Therefore, I need to recalibrate a little bit lower. So hit your target and you often aim higher the next time, miss it, and you might set the lower bar for that.
That is very cool. So here's the thing. What Lewin and Dembo found is that too many easy goals can make us complacent and not drive us to reach our potential, while too many ambitious goals can just wear us down and contribute to learned helplessness. There absolutely is a Goldilocks zone on this thing.
Yeah, which is also what Locke and Latham found, right? So again, the famous goal guys that we've talked with Gary Latham a couple different times on the show, and they emphasize the importance of goals being specific and challenging, but also realistic enough to keep people engaged. So again, if it's too high, we tune out; too low, they become bored and ignored. So all of this is leading up to the question that we asked here, right? So the question that we asked in the group community was this: do you set your goals based on your past performance or your future dreams? Again, thinking about this, or am I looking at how I did? Am I recalibrating? Am I using this level of aspiration, or am I just saying, no, I'm shooting for those stars and I'm going to aim for the stars, right?
Well, on our Facebook page, since this is about grooving on the Facebook page, our good buddy Paul Hebert had a really good response, and that he took this in a slightly different direction. He said, and I'm gonna read his quote here: "The map is not the terrain. The map is not the terrain. That these things are different, and we shouldn't conflate them." When we asked him to elaborate, because we went back and said, "What's the deal?"
Yeah. What do you mean the map isn't the terrain? What the hell are you talking about there,
he
buddy?
he said, "My point was more about separating the idea of achieving a specific goal from not achieving the ultimate goal." And I think sometimes we conflate this idea of a small failure is really a failure in the bigger picture. Think of it like this, and I'm again quoting Paul here. He says, "Think of it like this: it's the difference between saying or thinking a failure today means I cannot achieve my goal versus my failure today taught me something about how I can achieve my ultimate goal. They aren't necessarily linked." And
Yeah,
and I
it's
think that was a really great way of thinking about it, to separate long-term goals, north stars, really big picture things, because this is really important for us to have, super important for us to have. But it's also good to have objectives that are short-term and highly achievable, getting back to the Latham and Locke work.
right. And I think there's an interesting piece here. I think what Paul was bringing in is almost, it's this mindset. It is how am I viewing these setbacks? So if I don't achieve a goal, am I catastrophizing this? Am I saying, "Oh crap, I'm not good enough, and therefore I can't achieve the end"? Or do I have a growth mindset where I'm going, "Oh, what can I take from this failure and now apply it in the next"? And I think it's a little bit different than what the question we asked, but I think it was a really interesting take on this, because this idea of how we approach failure or success on those goals, again, to the levels of aspiration, all right, that impacts how we set our next goals, but also depending upon the mindset that we have. Is the mindset that we have one of growth, that I can learn from that failure? Therefore, I'm not going to necessarily decrease my goal as much because now I have additional information. I might be actually able to even increase that goal, which the research, at least from what they did, didn't align with that. But again, this is where modern kind of insights and the ancient work, ancient, I call it, from the 1930s, right?
It's a little
Of insights.
dramatic.
It is. It's ancient, man. It's almost 100 years old if you think about
Oh
it.
my God.
So that insight from there, mirrored with today, could really bring some cool insights that we just haven't been able to look at yet. Yeah.
I was so glad that you brought this up, especially Lewin and Dembo's work, because I wasn't familiar with it, and all the research that I've done on goal setting, I'd never seen it. And in the mid 2010s, George Lowenstein from Carnegie Mellon and I started running studies on salespeople during the goal setting experience. In other words, we interrupted them in the process of setting a goal, and we asked them a few questions to get their feedback on what they thought. But then we tracked what they thought about their goal and how confident they were in their goal setting compared to how well they did. And the important thing is that over time, some of these people went through this goal setting process more than once. So
Yeah.
they did it once, and then 6 months later, maybe they come back to it again, and they went through it again. And we found exactly what Lewin and Dembo found. that people who shot too high tended to recalibrate and discover, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm not thinking about this the right way. And people that shot too low were giving away opportunity. They recalibrated in a very positive way. They felt like they actually saw more. And another interesting thing about this is that, again, both men and women had too much, confidence and underconfidence. Women tended to be more likely to shoot low on the first time through, even though when we looked at their performance was same as men. Like
Yeah.
but they were just less confident the first time. Women were also quicker to make that correction in subsequent rounds. When they came back to it, they were like, okay, I learned from this. Boom, I'm gonna make a better choice the next time around. And I think so. It's kind of cool to see it happening in 2015, just as Lewin and Dembo saw it in the 1930s.
Which again, it goes to the genius of Lewin,
Oh,
which we need
totally.
to go on. But I find that work really fascinating, and I think there's some really cool stuff, and would love to be able to work with some other organizations and maybe kind of bring this up to more. But before we go past this question, Tim, I wanted to bring back, because you responded to this one as well,
Oh God.
and with
Okay.
what I thought was a really cool insight. And you said this, and I'm going to quote you again. Here we go. If incremental goals or objectives are more successful and more readily achieved, I'd start with past performance and gently lean into dreams. However, for aspirational, quote unquote, Mount Everest sorts of long term North Star goals, I'd rely less on past performance and lean more into dreams. You want to care to expand on that? Because A, beautifully said.
Blah 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 blah.
No, it's not.
So
This idea of incremental goals versus those Mount Everest, really, as what we call them in behavior shift and the work that we do with that, the keystone goals of your life, right? Those big, hairy, audacious BHAG goals that is you know out there.
yeah.
Those are different. They're different types of goals. So
Yeah, I think Eilert Fishbach would even say that we can call them goals, but they are so materially different that we need to treat them differently, and that's kind of where I'm
yes,
coming from. Is that the North Star, the Keystone Goal, this monstrous BHAG that's out there? Lean more into your dreams. Like, go for it. Dream big. Go for the long term. Think as big and broad and have the greatest impact on your life and others as you possibly can on those. However, in the short term, if you're measuring steps to climb Mount Everest, figure out what the next step is that you can achieve. So lean more into your past performance and gently lean into your dream just for inspiration so that you can keep achieving in order to give you fuel, because that is high octane stuff. That achievement is absolutely high octane stuff. So you've got to have enough wins in order to keep getting to the next step. But those are
yeah, and
incremental in nature.
and I think you nailed a really key piece on this, which is also, all right, if I'm climbing Mount Everest, if I have that big keystone goal, I need to break that down. I need to
Yes,
break it down into milestones. Like, all right, am I going? We're at base camp 1 now. I need to get to base camp 2, then I base camp 3, and those are milestones. I hit that, but even in between milestones, you have those stepping stones. You have to do the work in order to get there, right? So
that's right.
those are the ones where you go, okay, I can get this far today in this manner based upon how I've done in the past 2, 3 days. And I need to recalibrate that if I've done better than I did before or I did worse. And so that's where it really is important to make sure that you're taking into account the difference of how I performed in the past. So
Absolutely. Well said. I don't have anything else to add to that, Kurt.
all right.
That's
So that about wraps it up. Except, all right, we'll dig into one last question that we asked. This was a poll, actually. It wasn't a question, and it relates to the question that we ask almost every time that we have a speed round. We ask people if they are coffee or tea people, right? Now we asked the poll, and we had coffee, tea, other, both, and then
And other.
and other. Yeah.
So they can say
And
coffee
so
or tea or both or other.
right. And we got some interesting responses.
And the survey says we could just add a special effect just to have trumpets there, by the way, or a drum
But
roll.
what you don't like that?
Okay.
There you go. That's my drum roll. La 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 la.
It turns out with this audience, 40% of the people prefer coffee, 25% prefer tea, 10% both. Only 10% for both. And then there's this mysterious other. What is other? If it's not coffee,
Well,
tea, both, or like it's a coffee or tea question.
Adam Hansen, who we've had on the show, and we know, friend of ours, he wrote Dr. Pepper Zero in as another.
Yes, he did.
And I'm like,
And
going, and I
10% of the
was
people
thinking,
voted for that. Yeah,
well,
it's
yeah, so I
crazy.
think that's two people, right? So there you go. So I was interested that you didn't write in Coke Zero because that's your go-to
That
drink.
is. But it's not like for caffeine purposes. It's just because I like sweet and I like no calories. That's
Sweet, no calories. Wouldn't that be
that's
great if all food was sweet? Well, no, you need some calories, don't you? But yeah.
yeah, it needs some calories, but not all
I
calories.
really want ice cream to be a healthy food. If I had my dithers of like anything to like a magic wand, it would be like ice cream is a healthy food, and the more I eat, the healthier I'll be.
I'm just contemplating like what that would look like or taste like. Like, but
It would taste the same. It just is good for
it's
you.
just good
There you
for you.
go.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that enough? Can we wrap
I
up
think
now?
that wraps up this special episode. And again, if you found this interesting at all, please, if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, please join it. It is the Behavioral Grooves Groove Community. You can just, if you're out on Facebook, you can search groups, and it should pop up. We have almost 200 people in it now. We're, just keep it growing. Share it with your friends if you like it. And again, you'll get questions like these. You'll get the responses like we had a few times every week. And we would love to see you out there.
To quote our famous producer, Caroline Schaefer, see you out there, baby.
All right. With that, we hope that these groove questions have inspired you to go out this week and find your groove.